We woke up in Spain at Listeretta Park Up, our first full day in Spain, and it was like being back home. The weather was awful, it was raining, and the forecast was exactly the same for the next 4 days, and there was no way I were going to sit in the van for 4 days waiting for the weather to get better, so we had to change our plans. The original plan was to explore the north coast of Spain, going through Santander, Gijón, and eventually ending up in A Coruña. From A Coruña we would be heading down into Portugal, down the west coast, and exploring that, and getting down somewhere towards the Algarve. But with the weather forecast being what it was, I decided to head south where the forecast was much better, so we headed towards Pamplona to have a look round there. We set off in the rain and we headed towards Pamplona, and there were some cracking tunnels along the way, some lovely views from the mountain tops looking down into the villages as well below. I'm on the outskirts of Pamplona, and I needed some LPG, not filled it up since I was back in the UK. And the first place I stopped was a Repsol station just up the road, and they refused to serve it me. They said it's against company policy to distribute gas that is used for cooking. So I've come down the road and found this one. I think it's pronounced Aralar, and here they were really helpful and it wasn't a problem, and I managed to fill up the tank here, and it was only about €1 a litre. And while I was here I put some diesel in, €80, and it was only €143 per litre. In France it was about 180, so that's going to be great, saving on diesel. So I've walked into town. It was only about 20 minutes walk from the van, from the park up, and behind me is the bull ring of Pamplona. There is a picture of a matador dressed like Superman, and in the front of that is a statue of Ernest Hemingway for some reason. And as you probably know, Pamplona is famous for its bull run, and this is where they let the bulls run loose in the streets, and crowds of mainly young people run about trying not to get killed by these bulls, although 16 people have been killed since 1910 doing this. It usually takes place in July, and it takes place in the little winding streets of the old town. We're going to have a walk down there now and have a look at it, but I think it's really sporting of the Spanish to let the bulls get a chance to get some payback after all the things that goes off in this bull ring behind me. So we'll have a walk down there. Good morning folks, and it's a little bit damp again today. It's not very warm. Just took Ellie a little walk, and we stayed in the city centre park up last night. It's probably my first ever city centre park up, and it was okay. And this section of this car park is reserved just for campers and motorhomes. There was quite a few vans here last night. Some turned up quite late. It's got all the facilities for emptying your black and grey waste, and also topping up with fresh water. And it was fine, it was good. A bit of traffic noise, odd person walking about in the middle of the night, but nothing to worry about. And so today we're off to heading off towards Soria, and hoping it will be a little bit better weather down there. So I was just driving through this village, the other side of Lagorno, and passing this huge rocky outcrop, and I noticed these huge birds circling about, obviously vultures, and I've never seen a wild vulture in my life before, and for me that was so exciting, working with birds of prey as well. So I pulled up in the van, got the big camera out, and managed to get one half decent shot, I think. Anyway, I've not checked it yet, but that was I hope we see some more of that stuff, because that is fantastic. The journey down towards Surrey was breathtaking in places, really beautiful. The weather was nice and we kept seeing more vultures along the way, circling about over the hilltops. And it wasn't long before we reached the small village of Garay that must have some kind of connection with dinosaurs. This park up here at Garay was absolutely brand new. It was so clean and tidy, and there was only a few other vans there apart from myself. And though the village is pretty quiet, it does have a little park. If you go over the bridge over the river, there's a little park there and the odd bar in town that you can visit at night. But it was time to head south towards a village called El Boalo. Good morning folks. We spent the night here at El Boalo and it's a nice little area, a little bit noisy. They've got a kids playground right in front of the motorhome parking area, but they've got fantastic views of the mountains, or the Sierra as they call it here, and I've just put up the drone to show this off. And today we're off towards a villa, and I want to go there because there was a TV programme that I liked called The English, and it was filmed there, and the countryside just looks, I mean, it was supposed to be, as you watched it on TV, Midwest America with the massive plains and big skies, and I want to go and see that, so I'll catch up with you later. This next section of road towards the villa was the only part of the journey so far, but I sort of regret not using the toll roads because we went up the hillsides and winding, the van was struggling second gear, and I was feeling a bit sorry for the engine and the gearbox, and we actually reached 1511 metres high, which is quite a bit higher than Ben Nevis, and going back down the other side there was the switchback roads, a bit like in the Alps, nothing as bad as the Alps, but yeah, I just wish I'd used the toll roads at this point. The villa turned out to be a wonderful example of how, when you're not making plans and researching the places that you're going to, when you arrive there you get such a wonderful surprise. The villa was certainly a wonderful surprise to me. It was a World Heritage Site for a start. It got the world's largest, most well-preserved enclosed wall on the planet. It was 2.5 kilometres long, this wall, and it was spectacular. Inside you could get drinks and walk round and see the beautiful things that it had got to offer, and it was just absolutely fantastic, and I'd have never thought for a minute that something like that would have been there, but so I would definitely go back again. Good morning folks, we are leaving our villa today, and it's been an absolute blast here. The villa's been a wonderful surprise, and I'm not a city person, but it's got such a special vibe to it, that place. It's wonderful and it's worth a visit, and I never expected anything from a villa. I didn't really know much about it at all, but we had a couple of fantastic park-ups just on the outskirts of a villa as well. This was last night. There was nobody else here. It's just slightly up in the hills, and it was so peaceful. Didn't hear a peep all night from anywhere, and we had a pretty similar park-up the night before. So yeah, right, onwards and upwards today, and off we go to Caceres. Voiceover required at this point. It's pronounced Caceres. Caceres also turned out to be a lovely surprise. This too had an ancient wall that surrounded the inner city, and also this lovely square, and the caficulture was well in progress. The temperatures were in the high 20s, and it was just a lovely place with a lovely atmosphere once again. I had an ulterior motive for visiting Cáceres. I had a Facebook friend called Fernando who I'd never met before, and he flew falcons in this area, and he had invited me out with him and his friend Ismael Merlo and another friend Patricio, and we were going to go out on some land and fly one of Ismael's female peregrine falcons. And obviously this was really exciting for me, and I couldn't wait for this. So I had arranged to meet them here in Cáceres, and we were going out the following day. And as you can see from this GPS readout, the falcon had reached 340 metres high when we were flying. The lads were really warm and welcoming, and even treated me to breakfast after the flying session. When we had left Avila to drive towards Cáceres, we'd gone through Plasencia and met up with the lads, went flying the birds down there. But I really wanted to visit Montfrog National Park, so that meant driving north again from Cáceres. But I'd read a book some years ago about the amazing wildlife in Montfrog National Park. On arrival, the first thing we did was visit the Castillo de Montfrog, and it's quite a steep walk up the hillside, but the views were fantastic from the top. After walking back down from the van, we set off driving, and we came across all these cars parked up at the side of the road, people taking photographs, etc. And it was absolutely amazing place, this. I will never forget it ever. The wildlife that we saw there at that parking spot, that viewing point, was just phenomenal. Griffon vultures were nesting right in front of our faces on this cliff, and there was also the really rare black storks. There were 2 nests there in a crevice, and I also saw a rumpback swallow and other bits and pieces. But vultures were flying so close to us at times. It was just phenomenal. Since wild camping was illegal in the national park, we headed up to Plasencia to La Chopera campsite. It was €15.80 for the night, and it was nice. It was peaceful and quiet, and the facilities were good. The next morning we wrapped up and we set off towards Portugal, which was about a 2 or 3 hour drive. Here we are in Portugal, and it was a straightforward drive from the campsite we stayed at last night, and it's the first time I've ever been to Portugal, and obviously first time Ellie's ever been to Portugal. And it's so warm. It has been warm in Spain, in Cáceres, where we've been staying, and around that area for the last couple of days. It's been like 27 degrees, and it's probably the same here today. It's getting a little bit warm for Ellie, if I'm being honest. I've just had her under the shower, the outside shower on the van, just to cool her down a little bit, and feeling at the pavements and the footpaths with my hand to make sure it's not too warm for her if I take her out. But as in Spain, there was no fanfare crossing the border. It was straight through. There was a sign saying Portugal, not welcome to Portugal, but Portugal, which was nice because we knew where the border was then, rather than in Spain where there was absolutely nothing. And so we've arrived at this area just over the border from Badajoz, I think it's called. It was on Park for Night, and it's just basically a parking area. There is a water station over there. I can't see anywhere where you can empty your black waste. There is a grey waste emptying point, but we're topped up anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But there has been a couple of issues with Ellie recently, and one of them still exists, one of them still persists. But the first one, when we were out walking, was a few weeks before we set off to come here, she was in the undergrowth like she normally is, running about. She's a spaniel, and it's not unusual for Ellie to get a cut nose or a cut tongue or something like that, but she came out of the undergrowth absolutely caked in blood, with blood coming out of her nose. and I wiped it and put it back on the lead and walked her back home, and by the time we got back home she'd settled down, she was okay. But her nose kept bleeding a little bit, so I took her to the vet and they had a look, and they said, oh, we think we can see something up her nose, but we're not sure, she'll need to have a rhinoscopy. So I says, okay, well how much is that going to be? And they came back with £1,800. Yeah, 1,800. So I says, nah, that ain't happening. So I says, I'll just see how it goes on. Anyway, it's not been too bad. She's had the odd sneezing fit, and we came here, and while I was in France, one day she was sneezing like crazy and blood was coming out of her nose, and I was getting really worried and upset, thinking I might not be taking her back home from this trip, thinking she could have polyps or even a tumour up her nose or something like that. And I took her out on a little walk. She was on the lead and she was sneezing, and I looked down and this stick was sticking out of her nose, and so I grabbed it and just gently pulled it out, and that had been stuck in her nose for about a month. It was a little bit of bramble. It had got the spikes on it. It was quite big and thick, and it was just unbelievable that that had been stuck in there for all that time. And ever since that came out, she's been absolutely perfect. But the other problem is that with it being so warm here, she's drinking all the time, and she started wetting the bed at night. Here she is, and she's never done that before. And so what I did yesterday, I went to Aldi and bought some nappies, the biggest I could find, and they just about fit her. And so so she's having a nappy on at night now. It's like having a baby. But there was a little damp patch in the nappy she had on last night, but when we woke up this morning it was on the floor, so I think she jumped down during the night and lost it, and one of the towels was a little bit damp. I don't like restricting how much water she has, because it's not good for dogs. You shouldn't really do that. But we'll see how she goes anyway. So I just have to cut a little hole in the nappy to put her tail through and strap it on, and hope for the best. So we'll see what happens with that one. Anyway, I'll see you later.